Chapter 4 Sacagawea. You have already met Sacagawea, but there is much more to her story. When Sacagawea was 10 years old, she was captured and taken far away from her home by the Hidatsa, a Native American people. When she was older, Sacagawea married Charbonneau, a French Canadian. Together they hunted animals and traded furs. When they met Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, they joined the Corps. Captured means taken by force and kept as a prisoner. What do you notice about the image? Can you describe what you see? Do you notice her clothes, the necklaces around her neck, the blanket she is on, part of the teepee behind her, or the baby in her lap? Sacagawea's clothes were made out of deer skin and decorated with beads and porcupine quills. The fringe on the end of the sleeves and bottoms of her dress were made by cutting the skin into long strips. Sacagawea carried her baby on a cradle board, also called a papoose. The baby would be swaddled tightly in a blanket and tied to the board. The board could be carried in one's arms or on one's back, like a backpack. What happened to Sacagawea as a child? Who was Charbonneau? One day, both Lewis and Clark walked along the edge of the river. A sudden wind struck the canoe that carried all their papers, books, tools, medicines, and everything else they owned. Charbonneau was in the canoe, but he didn't know how to swim. He accidentally turned the canoe over on its side, dumping everything into the river. Sacagawea jumped into the river and saved all the things that had washed overboard. Remember that the Corps of Discovery had to carry everything it owned in its canoes. What would have happened if Sacagawea had not been able to save everything that was in the canoe? What did Sacagawea do when Charbonneau accidentally turned the canoe over? Lewis and Clark wrote that Sacagawea was brave and strong. When the Corps began to walk across the Rocky Mountains, Sacagawea knew she was back home in the land of her people, the Shoshone. She noticed that tree bark had been removed to make food and medicine. This was a sign that the Shoshone were nearby. Bark is the rough outer layer of a bush or a tree. It's like the tree's skin. What did Lewis and Clark think of Sacagawea? Where did the Shoshone live? How did Sacagawea know she was near her people? The Corps needed horses to carry all their belongings across the Rocky Mountains. The explorers needed to trade some of the things they had brought for horses. When they met the Shoshone chief, Sacagawea gasped. The chief was her long-lost brother. She had found her family again. Her brother agreed to trade horses to Lewis and Clark and to send guides to show them the way across the mountains. Gasped means to have breathed in suddenly and loudly. It's often a sign of surprise. Why would Sacagawea gasp when she saw her brother? What did the Corps of Discovery need to cross the mountains? How did the Corps get the horses it needed? Sacagawea also helped the Corps cross the dangerous snow-covered Rocky Mountains. When the Corps ran low on food, she knew which berries and roots to eat. Sacagawea helped keep the men alive. Without her, it is unlikely that Lewis and Clark would have made it to the Pacific Ocean. Berries are small fruits that have seeds. Roots are parts of plants that are underground. How did Sacagawea help when the Corps didn't have much food? Sacagawea was a strong, brave woman. We have named mountains and rivers after her. There are statues of her all over our country. 200 years later, people still remember her. The United States has made a dollar coin that shows her picture. What is on the dollar coin made in honor of Sacagawea? Now that you have learned about Sacagawea, how would you describe her? The Lewis and Clark route started in St. Louis. They took the Missouri River and then crossed the Rocky Mountains. Then they took the Columbia River to get to the Pacific Ocean. What are some of the different ways that Sacagawea helped Lewis and Clark?